Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of I Am I. My name, as always, is Joshua Ansley in this incarnation. So today we're getting back to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, getting back to the yamas, and onto the fifth yama, which is Aparigraha, or Aparigraha. However the fuck you want to say it, just don't be greedy, right? That's basically the idea. So that's what it is. It's about non-attachment and non-greed, non-coveting, sort of getting out of the space of jealousy, right? So as with all of these concepts, it's all coming from the basis of the fact of how you would behaving and how you would act if you knew at your divine core that you were whole, healed, and complete. Right? If you really understood that on deeper levels, right? Not just conceptually, but if you had an experience of it. So it's sort of like fake it till you make it. It's started putting these ideas into practice, into play, which are going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be uncomfortable for your limited, finite, conditioned consciousness, but only because it's trying to shift that conditioned consciousness to recognize the infinite of your true consciousness, right? So that's the whole idea with this. So if you understood that you were whole, healed, and complete, and if you understood that you weren't this separate ego, which is why you have the kleshas and things like that telling you like the ego is in ignorance of your divine core, and the ego and this idea of separation, all these things are going to stop you from behaving in these ways, right? And they're going to limit you, right? Because they are limited, and you are not. You are not limited. So it's your ego and this idea of separation, this conditioning that has been taught to us. And that we've perceived through our senses, right? It's our way of understanding these things, of understanding the world. It's through these senses, through these limited five senses, and we've constructed this limited understanding of reality. And we just basically don't see the infinite inside of ourselves and who as we truly are. And we don't see the infinite in other people as well, right? So we see ourselves as separate. We see it as I'm here and you're there. Right? And that's really going to, from that sense of separation and from that sense of not being whole and complete, you're going to have jealousy of other people. And that's why it's so difficult with these processes, and it's what turns people off is this idea that you should or should not, right? That's what literally it's often translated as should not, as the don'ts. The yamas are the don'ts, right? And that's why I think it's much more powerful to translate it as mastery. So it's like, it's empowering then to say, I have mastery over these things that I think are me, but really I have mastery over these things. Otherwise, you are being ruled by these ideas that you think are you, but are really just conditioned, this concept of you, right? So when you have that idea, this smaller idea of you, then there's going to be separation, and that idea of you is always going to need more, or always going to want more. It's that disease of more, I need more, right? Mahatma Gandhi said, the earth absolutely supplies enough for everyone's needs, but it cannot possibly supply enough for everyone's greed, right? And from that finite space of mind, from that finite state of being, of you just thinking you are this separate idea of consciousness of self, of Joshua Ansley, and I'm this body over here, which is, it doesn't mean that that's not true. So it's not this space of like, none of this is reality. Of course, it's a portion of reality, right? But it is not this ultimate reality that we're speaking of, this unconditioned state of who you are that is the foundation of everything, right? And that's what these practices are taking us towards, is to point that conditioned consciousness to that direction, so that you don't have to have this attachment to something. Attachment being defined as anything without which you would not be okay, right? Now, again, we have these people that when we see it too black and white, that is the problem too. If we have this black and white thinking, so it's like, all right, so I'm just supposed to just not, then it translates to not caring and not having compassion, or not, saying, so I'm attached to my children, so I'm not going to have any emotions if a child were to God forbid, to pass, right? That's not what it's saying. It will, however, ultimately in the end recognize that is that attachment that is causing that suffering, right? It definitely is that attachment that is going to cause the suffering. So when we start to move into a flow, like the flow of the breath, right? There's no fear that when you have that exhale, man, I'm looking at this beard, this thing is getting freaking serious, man. I am looking like Santa Claus. All right, anyway. And these are my gifts to you. Ho, ho, ho. Cut. All right. What the hell was I saying? I don't know. So I'll just start rambling back into it. So when we have this this attachment, when we move into the breath, this flow of the breath, right? We have no fear that as we exhale, we're not attached to the breath, right? Unless we're actually, if you get into a really strong breath practice, where I'm usually moving towards that one breath, one movement practice, we do get attached to the breath. We're like, oh, I don't have enough breath, I'm gonna die. Start breathing faster, and everything starts speeding up, and we start to get into this space of fight, flight, or freeze, this fear-based kind of thing, which is, that klesha, that clinging to life, as opposed to non-attachment and recognizing, no, it's okay, take a deeper breath. If you need more oxygen, take a deeper breath. It's a really profound practice. Now, I'm not saying that when you go out and run, although I do work towards deepening my breath as long as I can when I'm running, right? But eventually, if you're really moving in a high-paced thing, your body's going to be like, open your mouth and breathe, deeper to get more, to gasping for more oxygen, right? But if you can really start to slowly in your practice move towards deepening that breath with that movement, even when your bodies start going like, I need more, that's when you will be able to take deeper breaths and stay more stable, even when the body starts to get into a place of this isn't okay, because you are not your body. And while it has an infinite fount of wisdom, it is not who you are, right? And it does have this divine intelligence that we can surrender to. But we have to be careful of when our mind and the body is, and that primal understanding and that survival mechanism is ruling us. We're moving out of the survival mechanism into higher planes of understanding, into higher levels of consciousness. So we don't get attached to that breath on the exhale. We know immediately that inhale is going to come in. We trust. So this works in with a little bit of trust. It also works directly into a space of contentment, which is one of the niyamas. It's very related to that, right? So a practice of santosha, contentment, is going to bring you into a space of not constantly needing something more or thinking that you need something more, right? Then that moves us into a state of being able to give, right? So when you have somebody that really wants something from you and they're grasping for you and they really want it could be like a date, a partner. Somebody's like, oh my God, he's still texting me. Oh my God, you believe he's still texting me? Like, get over it, seriously. Right? So they're grasping at you constantly for more. And it's kind of like, yo, I need my space. Like, give me some space. Like, back up. Let me come to you. You give me my space. And this is a lot to do with relationships too, right? It's like because it shows an indication that you are not stable and you're not steady when you're constantly grasping for something. So when you work inward, right, when you take that right use of energy, brahmacharya, we talked about last week, and start to move that energy inward instead of even towards your partner, the thing is you get to enjoy these things in life so much more. This does not mean that you don't ever have to experience life. You have to live just moving inward, sitting in a cave somewhere, meditating. And this is just my opinion, right? This is definitely how I feel about this, is that is the kingdom of heaven on earth. It's to learn these principles to live a better life. While I do believe that there's reincarnation and we come back and we don't die, right? I do believe that this is to bring it back into in this life and to live it to its fullest, right? But you'll start to recognize that all the things and the desires and the drives that you have will start to change when you recognize your wholeness and completeness. So you stop grasping for it in the world, something that you might not even be aware that you're thinking that some sort of external thing in some way is going to give you happiness and peace. And it's not. It's moving inward. And then once you make that connection to that wholeness and completeness, then you're able to give. Now, a lot of these teachings can be misinterpreted, so you get into service. So it's like, don't be so selfish, don't be greedy, go give, be of service, right? And you're just constantly giving, and you will be depleted because you have not recognized your infinite source within you, that from that which you are giving. Right. From there, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. My grammar just went all over your screen, right? Little bukkake grammar, little grammar bukkake all over the screen. If you don't know what that is, don't look it up. Okay, so where am I? Come back. Too far to yellow. Okay, so basically, all right, so let's just moving back into the space of service, right? So it's not about just giving serve until you have nothing left, because if you are actually giving and don't actually recognize that you're giving from a space of expecting something in return, right? Now this is a good relationship to give and receive, right? So we need to learn to give and receive and understand if we're in a relationship where we have been giving, and we're not getting anything in return, and we keep giving because we hear a message about being of service or be selfless and all this kind of stuff, that's asinine. It's because we're in that relationship in the first place where all these other layers, like the root chakra, that we're not grounded and steady with that piece of information. It is the alpha and the omega, that you are divine at your core. So that gives us something to work towards. Once you understand that you have that divinity at your core, that you are stable from within yourself, you don't need these external things. You might use these external things. I certainly use the earth and my connection into this stone and this rock to get grounded, right? But then as I grow in the strength within myself, so I move from these external things that are going to be positive, away from the negative, into the positive, in this world of duality, until I move that singularity inside of myself and have that strength. And then from that singularity, that sense of wholeness and completeness, then I can move all the way up into the third chakra, going through the second, of course, with your relationships and how you're relating, right? So if you're in that shitty relationship, go back down to the first and understand how to become whole and complete within yourself, right? So all this still coming back to this non-greed space so that you can give, right? So that you don't have to be attached to something else, so that you can let it flow and let it come to you, right? This doesn't mean we don't take any action in the world. This doesn't mean, it might mean that we take different action or less action, right? Because society is going to be telling you that you need to accomplish, achieve, and that you need to have something, you need to accumulate in order to get something. That doesn't mean that having things is bad. It doesn't mean that achieving something is bad, so don't be that black and white about it. It's understanding that if you are defined by your accomplishments and achievements only, if you think that's where you get your sense of self, right? We get the sense of self and then we go out and can accomplish and can achieve. And it's not even that black and white, because once you start to accomplish and achieve, you can get a little bit deeper sense of self when you recognize a sense of wholeness and step out into it, right? Then you get it does make you feel good to accomplish and achieve something, right? But then ultimately still from that space, even moving back in once again to not need those accomplishments and achievements to get us whole. So we move to a place of absolutely just giving from a sense of wholeness, from a complete stability and strength, right? So that is when we move into this flow of the, like I said, with the breath of constantly of giving and receiving. When you surrender yourself, they say that if you surrender to Saraswati and Lakshmi, the goddesses of finances and knowledge and all this stuff, then they surrender to you. They sit at your feet and will surrender to you. Because when you're striving and reaching for them, it's that same kind of that grasping. Nobody wants that death grasp on them, right? So we have to learn to flow, to wear life like a loose garment, as one of my mentors used to say. Many of my mentors used to say, actually. And so a shift fundamentally starts to happen, right? Working outward, inward, and inward, outward, right? So maybe in your life we need to have some restraint and some mastery over ourselves, but it's to move inward and get that strength and that stability so that we can find that wholeness and completeness and give, right? It's very natural from that sense of comparison to be jealous and to want more, right? And it's that weird sense of space, like you're not going to have a really healthy relationship until you get healthy within yourself, until you stop thinking that a relationship is going to actually is going to make you whole and complete, and it's going to make everything better. If I just had love, I have so much love to give. Yes, you do. Start to give it to yourself, right? And find that then suddenly you'll have a relationship which you might be able to live without, because we learn to love those who can love and respect themselves, right? And that's how we can not be dependent and codependent on other people. And that's how we can have that wholeness and completeness and then give from that space, from a sense of wholeness and completeness. These are very difficult, complex concepts, right? That seem counterintuitive at times. So there was I'm going to go into a story by Leo Tolstoy. I'm not sure, I heard it somewhere, so I'm not sure if he wrote it or if he was, it was a dream that he had or what it was, but basically he talked about having a dream where he was in a room and there was two doors, one labeled heaven, one labeled hell. And he went into the door that was hell, and there was a bunch of people sitting around in a circle and a huge feast, all this food, but their arms had stints, they were locked, and they had spoons, long spoons coming out of their hands, right? And they were all miserable because they couldn't figure out how to bend their elbows and feed themselves. right? So everybody was in hell and starving and miserable. And he backed out of that room and went over into heaven. And what he saw in heaven was the same exact situation, right? The same bunch of people, a different bunch of people, right, in heaven, but sitting around in the same circle and with all this food, and they had the same stints and the same spoons coming out of their hands, and they were all happy, right? And it was all because they had learned and figured out how to serve each other and to feed each other, right? And so it sounds strange because there's a sense of wholeness and completeness that comes from moving inward, but it's also from finding healthy people with which we can communicate, right? And getting ourselves into a healthy community where we can learn how to take care and love ourselves, and we can learn to love in healthy ways, right? And it's a really beautiful thing when it starts to happen within ourselves. And it's a difficult practice. That's why this is a practice, right? It's a practice of non-attachment, of not grasping at things, to let life just flow in and out, right? It's like our relationship with money. So money is only valuable because we can give it away. It's not valuable to keep it. Its value is in giving it away. That's where you get something back, right? So this idea of just getting more money is just about that greed and that disease of more, and I must get. When you work into a space of wholeness and completeness with yourself and let that money and that energy flow in and out of you, don't get stuck and blocked with things and needy and grasping and jealousy, and when you recognize your own gifts and your own journey and your own path and your own karma and this whole separate thing that you have, which is actually part of the wholeness, right? That's when you step into flow in this life, and it becomes so much more beautiful. It becomes non-attached, right? So we can come into a space of dependence on something higher, on our higher power, on God, whatever you want to call it, right? And when you get into these concepts of that of God, it's like you work into these principles and you see like that this consciousness that we're moving towards is not even your consciousness. Right, so it's Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about it. It's like, this is my consciousness, meaning God's consciousness. It's a part of this whole, which is actually your true identity. So when you understand how to identify as that instead of this lower being, that's when you step into the wholeness and completeness of being. And it's incredibly powerful when you have an experience of that, when you move into that self-realization. Right, that's what that is understanding who you are on these deeper levels. So. And it seems contradictory, but it's like these things are not making you stuck. They seem like, from your mindset, it may feel like it's restrictive, but it's actually not. It's freeing. It's actually liberating you through these practices. It's backwards. Every way we think is backwards. So we introduce these concepts of how it would look if you were actually whole, healed, and complete within yourself. So just let it flow, my people. Let it flow. Still 17 minutes. I thought this one was going to be a lot shorter. I just rambled on about the same shit. Ramble on. It's so powerful to put your hand over your heart. I'm just going to add this in here at the end. It's like very simply, it actually stimulates the vagus nerve, same way as chanting, which helps you move into a state of stillness and ease. There's so many of these simple practices. We don't have to get all heady and crazy about it. It's just put your hand on your heart. Take a breath. Start to flow. Let go of those things that are just blocking us the way we think it has to be, right? That's only the way you think it has to be. Recognize that your thoughts are not you and they are not right. They are just one way of being. They are just one interpretation of a much, much bigger story of who you really are. I love you all. In Lakesha Lakin, I am you. You are me. Namaste.